Today, I am joined by Victor Davis Hanson to go through some of the biggest stories in the news. Victor, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me.
You've been a busy man. I watch your show on the Daily Signal. You do a great job of basically capturing what's going on in the country in about 5 minutes. Takes me about 35 minutes to do that. So I wanted to go through a clip that I saw on Fox News. This is Jesse Waters and podcaster Patrick Bet-David talking about Obama's legacy versus Donald Trump's legacy. And then I want to get your thoughts on this. Let me play that.
Yeah.
You know, the trust in the media right now is at an all-time low, and no one trusts the press. Do you think it would help them if they would give a little and say, yay, cleaned up D.C., it looks great. The homeless are gone, the streets are cleaner, there's less crime. Is it their inability to just give a little bit is what makes everybody just not buy this garbage?
They have a hard time with that, but the reality of it is this guy's going to keep winning over and over and over again, and it's going to upset them even more. You got enemies that are wanting to do business with them. You got him flying, working harder than anybody else. I keep saying this. I dare anybody right now measure how hard they're working, and this man is 79 years old, about to be 80 years old next year in 2026. They're envious. They're jealous. It's already been proven. He's been vindicated. History books are going to favor this guy. One day in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to be sitting in a movie theater watching a movie of his or a show on Netflix that's going to come out in 10 series. The amount of stories they're going to show of what this man was able to do. Many kids are going to grow up saying, I want to grow up to be like Donald Trump. Obama, this is the worst way to finish up your legacy. You came off your 2 terms. You were supposed to be Black Jesus. Everyone's turned against you. You guys had to pay people like Beyonce and all these other guys to come perform for you. Trump is going after protecting folks in Nigeria. Nicki Minaj is coming saying thank you to President Trump. Trump didn't pay Nicki Minaj for a thank you. They have a hard time winning their own people over. Trump is winning their people over, and this is driving them insane.
Okay, what do you think of the Trump legacy compared to the Obama legacy? He seems to be a dying star at this point.
Yeah, I think he's really suffered. There's been a lot of disclosures about him that haven't aged well. And more recently, this shutdown is really over, at least in the Democratic mind, that they want multi-billion-dollar continuations of supplements or subsidies for Obamacare. And we've already been there once where we did give subsidies. And remember, it was sold in 2010 on the idea that it was the Affordable Care Act, and it would supposedly market itself in the free market, and it would be streamlined. You'd go in, your doctor would open up his computer, he'd put everything on the computer, and bam. And everything they said about it, you were not going to lose your doctor, you're not going to lose your healthcare plan, everything was untrue. And then they should have just agreed with the Republicans in Trump's first term and redone it, and they stopped that. And John McCain was the deciding vote, as you remember, and voted to stop the Trump reform of it. And then they thought, well, we're not going to worry about it because we have a 4-year subsidy. And then it expired, and it just brings the attention to, and it has his name attached to it, so it's bad. And then in the news, almost everything in the news comes in some way back to Barack Obama, partly because we didn't really have a president between Trump 1 and 2. We had Biden, so nobody really thought of Obama. Well, then we've learned that he had a meeting and John Brennan was in the news yesterday getting angry that somebody questioned him about the Russian collusion. And then we, of course, had this latest stuff about Comey and Russian collusion, his notes. And then the subtext of all those stories is that Brennan and Comey and Clapper were in his office both during the 2016 campaign and during the transition, and were told by Obama, do not listen to your subordinates' disinterested assessment that there is no Russian collusion. I want you to come back. And they've said that. In fact, Clapper at the time and Brennan said, thanks to Obama, he kept it alive. And that was supposed to be and encomium. And then you see what he comes out. It's not a good look, because he was a community organizer when he left office, and he kept lecturing. He said at one point, I'm not going to run for president just to get wealthy. I'm here to change the country, fundamentally transforming America. So what's he do when he gets out? He gets a multi-million-dollar estate at Martha's Vineyard. Then he gets a multi-million-dollar house in the Tony area of Washington, Colorado. Then he gets a huge multi-million-dollar estate on the beaches in Hawaii. Of course, all these seaside places we were told would be undulated by global warming. So then, when there's a campaign, as now, he flies out of one of these estates and he drops in, and as he did during the 2024, and he has this kind of Marxist stick where he talks down to people as if they're suffering from Marxist false consciousness, and they don't really know what's good for them. But the wizard comes in and he says to black staffers, don't dare vote for this awful Trump when you have a black woman running. Then he gives another time, he says, as he did I think a month ago, I don't get it with Hispanics. They're voting for gas and inflation, these issues, when they should have voted basically DI for Harris. And then most recently, now he's doing the same thing in Virginia, only it's kind of ironic when he was telling black staffers that you have to vote for a black woman over this atrocious white man. Now he's telling everybody that the first black potential governor in Virginia, you have to vote against her and vote for a white woman, not only a white woman, but a white woman who is endorsing a attorney general who is black, who's called for the death and killing of his opponent and or a legislator and his children. So it doesn't look good from all of that. And then when you say his legacy, I don't know what his legacy was. The economists are starting to conclude that after the meltdown of 2008, it was sort of like the Depression, that we would have had a quicker natural recovery if he hadn't had all of these extended government interventions and big debt and all that. He was the one, we forget that before Obama, there was something called affirmative action. And it included about 12% of the population, African American mostly, sometimes Hispanics. But Asians weren't eligible, people from India weren't eligible. And he in a very brilliant, although Machiavellian fashion, he said, it's not about slavery or Jim Crow or past complaints against the majority culture. It's much bigger than that. It's race. And we're going to call it diversity. And diversity shall be defined as dividing the country up between victims and victimizers, no in between, and that you'll be on one side of the ledger, not about your claims to historical grievance, but your skin color. So all you people from India, you're now diverse. All you people from Asia, you're diverse. Anybody who's not white is diverse. And that was, I can tell you, almost immediately in 2009, I had a neighbor who was from India, and he used to come over and complain to me that he was very dark, and he was darker than Hispanics and blacks, and he was getting no affirmative action for his kids because he didn't qualify. He was very wealthy, by the way. And now I've seen him, and he's delighted because he says that he's part of the diverse community. And that's what Obama did. He really destroyed the idea of class and warranted grievance. He just said, you can be a multimillionaire. You can be Oprah Winfrey. You can be an Hispanic immigrant who steps 1 foot across the border, and in 1 nanosecond, you have claims against the United States based on your race. And that was really deleterious. And that caused the big backlash against DEI. So most of the things he implemented are being undone. It's kind of the opposite with Trump. He started out with a very bad reputation among, after January 6th. He did a lot of very good things the first term, but people bought into the lawfare. He was facing 91 indictments. They tried to get him off the ballot. 25 states. They raided his home. They did everything imaginable, $500 million in initial fines. And everybody said he was all over by January 6th. He supposedly tried it. And they would look back and they said, oh, well, the COVID, that was his fault. And then he got elected. And really, I didn't think, a lot of people didn't think that he would try to wage a 360-degree counter-revolution, but he did. He not only stopped the border entries, he's deporting people, he's addressing crime. He ended the Iranian nuclear threat for the time being. He took the gloves off Israel, who destroyed Hezbollah and hurt the Houthis and probably destroyed Hamas. He's addressing, I think, 7 regional conflicts that he got ceasefire in. We were told, and I was told by generals, that we're never going to get the 40 or 50,000 recruits because young people are too fat, they're in gangs, they use drugs, they don't want to join the military, they can't compete with private. And all of a sudden, there is no recruitment problem. We met all of our goals. He's refashioning the military. And at home, we were told we would be in a recession. The Wall Street Journal said we'd be in a recession and the stock market would collapse if we had tariffs. We don't. And you look at inflation, it's a little high, but it's not the average 5.3 each year of Biden. One year he had 9.1. So we're 3%. We're probably going to have over 3% GDP. The stock market hit record. It's kind of scary. It's too high. It's hit record levels. And so everything has been going very well. And then he's got this cultural revolution. And if you and I talked a year ago like this, and I said to you, I think he's just going to take DEI head on. And he's going to stop the DEIOs in all the universities. And he's going to tell these universities that you can't have separate dorms and you can't admit by race. You got to follow the 2023 Supreme Court. I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed that high schools in California, of all places, are now saying that biological males who are transgender cannot compete in women's sports. That's happening a lot. There's resistance to that executive order, but it's happening. And so he is sort of waging a cultural revolution. So we don't know what the end of it, but I wrote a book about his first term, and he is a tragic hero. I don't mean to glorify or to denigrate, but a tragic hero is somebody who does very good things with the acknowledgement it might not work out well for himself. So he had to go through all of this, but he's kind of like my generation used to watch movies like The Magnificent Seven or Shane or High Noon. It was always the same character. The townspeople were kind of anemic. They couldn't stop the existential threat. Sometimes it was the cattle barons or outlaws took over. So they bring this guy in who nobody really, he's Clint Eastwood type movie. He's mysterious. You don't like the way he talks, looks, the skill sets, but he comes in and he takes care of the existential problems because he uses methodology that no one in polite society would use. The way he talks, the way he looks, the way he acts. And as things get better, people then think, wow, we really didn't need Shane, did we? We really didn't need Gary Cooper and High Noon to just get out. And they leave and they ride off in the sunset. So every single problem that we didn't know how to deal with, we were losing 70,000 people a year to fentanyl. And everybody was scared to confront the Chinese and say, we're not going to trade with you, or we're going to tariff you at 120% unless you stop fentanyl. Or nobody in their right mind thought he would blow up drug running ships on the high seas that were coming into U.S. ports with drugs. So, and I think that after he does that, then we're going to say in a year or two, gosh, why did he kill all those people without a trial on the high seas? And my gosh, he did those deportations, but I had a housekeeper that she wasn't bothering anybody. She got deported. Or they're going to say, gosh, why did he use the F word so many times? And why did he? So that's going to happen. And And that's going to be part of his legacy too. But the main thing that I'm getting at is he's going to have a much more positive, concrete legacy than Obama did. Obama will be nicer, and people will think, oh, he was the first black president. He was so mellifluous. Trump was so mean. But if you actually look at what they did, it's going to favor Trump by far.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay. Great synopsis there. Let's pretend for a second that Obama did still have a legacy and the great influence that they hoped he would. Listen to what he said back in 2013 about government shutdown.
If Republicans do not like the law, they can go through the regular channels and processes to try to change it. That's why we have elections. So they can go through the normal processes and procedures of a democracy, but you do not threaten the full faith and credit of the United States of America. Shutting down the government just because you don't like a law that was passed, I have to say no Congress before this one has ever in history been irresponsible enough to threaten an economic shutdown, to suggest America not pay its bills, just to try to blackmail a president into giving them some concessions. I will not negotiate on anything when it comes to the full faith and credit of the United States of America. We're not going to submit to this kind of total irresponsibility. Congress needs to pay our bills on time. Congress needs to pass a budget on time. Congress needs to put an end to governing from crisis to crisis.
Wow. Victor, where's that party? This is the exact, we're going 4 weeks on a shutdown. I'm getting ready to travel. I might be in the airport for 6 hours, they say. I'm excited to share with you guys an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness. C15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years. And get this, studies have confirmed that it has 3 times better, broader, and safer application than omega-3 fatty acids. Now, Fatty 15 co-founder Dr. Stephanie Venn Watson discovered C15 while working with the U.S. Navy to continually improve the health and welfare of aging dolphins, of all things, right? Now, C15 works in multiple ways. It repairs age-related damage to cells, protects from future breakdown, boosts mitochondrial energy output. You're going to have more energy, healthier cells. It activates pathways in the body that help regulate sleep, mood, and naturally repair mechanisms that support overall health. This functionality leads to a myriad of exciting benefits now and as we get older, namely improved metabolic, liver, and heart health, smoother functioning joints, deeper sleep, healthier hair, skin, and nails. You guys, this is so important. As you age, almost every doctor has told me to start taking fish oil pills in order to get the omega-3 in me, right? But now, Fatty 15, through the Navy and medicine, they discovered something that is 3 times more powerful. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish your C15 levels and restore long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Gardner and use code Gardner to get that discount. It's awesome. You guys are going to absolutely love it.
Well, you got to remember that's what he does. He gave a eulogy at a funeral of a distinguished congressman. He said, we got to get rid of the filibuster. It's a legacy of Jim Crow. It's a racist relic. And then when I heard that, I thought, well, wow. When you were in the minority in the Senate, you, Barack Obama, led the filibuster against Justice Alito and tried to stop even a vote coming up. And then, of course, when the Republicans got back the Senate, we were told by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders that they wanted to get rid of the filibuster. Now Trump's saying you should because the Republicans are in the majority. So he does that all the time, Obama, and he does it because he thinks that he's still in his late 30s or early 40s, and he just came onto the scene, and it's 2004, and he's at the Democratic convention. Nobody knew who he was. They had a mediocre candidate, John Kerry. Everybody in the Democratic Party despised, and he got in there and said, I just want to say, you know, we have no red states. We have no blue states. We just have a United States. And everybody, oh, wow. Here's a young, articulate black man. And of course, his own party stalwarts were quite racist. Harry Reid said he's he's an articulate black man. I can't believe it, basically. Joe Biden said he's the first clean, articulate black candidate we've seen. And he swept the world, and he knew that just on his rhetoric. And by 2008, we didn't really hold him account. So he was saying things and doing things that he really racialized the country. We were making pretty good progress where race was becoming incidental, not essential to who we are. And then he started in, Trayvon looks like the son I never had. And we know the police routinely profile and the beer summit. And then during the campaign, there was Michelle. I'm downright mean country. Never been proud of the country to Barack Obama. Always raised the bar. I was in Target and somebody made me reach for a toy. It was just constant. And it was really disturbing, but he always thought he could get himself out of a jam or say anything because he was so eloquent, and people would nod. You saw the people nodding. Nobody said, well, wait a minute. You've been all over the record on this, and he is now. He's thinking the shutdown is great, as you pointed out. So, and he's the same way in the filibuster. He's the same way on packing the court. He was for that. He's the same thing letting in 2 new states. It's whatever is transaction. He's a transactionalist, and whatever he thinks is in the interest of this progressive trajectory or agenda, he's for. And he thinks that because he's a beloved figure and he's charismatic and eloquent, that he can pull it off. But he's lost a step. I don't think he realizes that people make fun of him now. And when you looked at the faces of those black Harris staffers when he was saying you've got to convince black people what's good for them, they didn't look very happy. And I think people are kind of getting tired of him. Kind of like Jimmy Carter, he would come out and lecture everybody on their morality and then go back, and at least he built houses and stuff. But I think they would rather have somebody like George W. Bush stay on his ranch, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha. Because of the shutdown, President Trump has seen a small drop in favorability. The Democrats have seen a large drop in favorability. I believe the government reopens. Donald Trump bounces back. He gets to it. They just keep going with the MAGA agenda. Can the Democrat Party recover? Because they're hurting in a lot of ways other than just the government shutdown.
Yeah, they are. And there's two ways to answer that. There's the short term, and that is will they do, as most out parties do in the first term of an administration, will they do well on the midterms? I don't know that answer. I have a feeling they won't do as well as they should historically, but they're on the wrong side of the issues. It's not just personalities involved. I know that Joe Biden was a pathetic candidate. Kamala Harris was a pathetic candidate. They hadn't had a good candidate since Obama. But my point is that on the border, on deportations, on crime, on foreign policy, on the economy, they're all, not on transgenderism, et cetera, on DEI, they're not polling in the majority. So that means that they have that base that sets the tone has sort of, put no one to the left of us. That's the attitude. There's never going to be anybody to the left of us. We're going to get all the leftists in. They set the agenda, and you can't run on those places outside of Manhattan or maybe New Jersey and Virginia. It's a toss-up, but That's not a winning agenda. The other thing that's happened is structural, long-term. And that is that Donald Trump came in, and not so much he tried in the first term, but he's really refined it and honed it in the 2024. He got 55% of the male Hispanic vote, 23 to 26% of the black male vote, 49% of Hispanics. He really went into the Democratic Party. And the first time he stole the white working class from them. Second time, he's stealing minorities, and he's substituting it with class. So he's saying to a black person or a brown person or an Asian, you all have more in common with white people, and you white people have more in common with these so-called minorities because you're all in the middle class, and that's who I'm interested in. And your elites in each of your respective groups don't represent you. And that was nobody thought you could do that. So that was the first Republican in my lifetime who didn't run on, I'm going to reduce capital gains, I'm going to privatize Social Security, we're going to go in and nation bail or something like that. It was a very different message, and it really hollowed out the Democratic Party's constituency. And then the hatred of Donald Trump. And I think he did try to troll them. I mean, those tweets, and I'm going to buy Greenland, or we're going to invade Canada, or we're going to go down to Panama. They had certain, rationales to get something done by threats, but they were really getting to the Democratic Party. And they adopted the attitude that whatever Trump is for, even though if he's for things that people want, we're going to be against. And so you get into this where Nancy Pelosi said yesterday he's the worst creature on earth, or he's the horrible thing in history. And then you got Gavin Newsom's wife yesterday saying, my kids we all hate it. It's just, that really hurts them. And so he's been able to really, one of his legacies is he destroyed the Democratic Party as we knew it. It's a new party. It's the subsidized radical poor and the elite professional classes, and it's not many middle class people.
Yeah. I was in California, where you live, during the No Kings rally. We drove through it. People were screaming, banging pans, and screaming, he's a child rapist, like just horrible things that have never been proven. Why do you think that they are trying so hard to position him as a tyrannical king, when if you just watch the news, you see, even though he shouldn't have to go to court, he goes to court every time, and he typically wins. Yep. And he had to go through the election process 3 times, and he won the majority, and he won the Electoral College. To me, that doesn't sound like someone behaving like a king. Why position him as a king when most common sense people can go, he sure doesn't act like a king?
Yeah, and you add into the equation that they tried to get him off the ballot on 25 states, which the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional. They raided his house. They said it was full of classified documents he stole. They took 14,000 files out. They found 102. And then they even had to mess them up on the ground and put little stickers, classified, and take pictures of it. They indicted him 91 times in 4 or 5 different courtrooms. And we know that was coordinated, that Fannie Willis's Nathan Wade was in the White House. We know that Jack Smith was appointed 3 days after Trump declared his candidacy in November 15th of 2022. So they did all of those things that are representative kings or monarchs or autocrats. They warped the law to get him. And then every time he gets one of these lower court judges who were the lower district was never intended. They were regional for points of convenience. If I'm in California, you file with appeal or something with the Ninth Circuit or the district judges here. But they came up with this idea that a lower court district judge is going to rule on some esoteric, and it's going to be the law of the land for everybody. But even when they do that, and they do it deliberately when they know they don't have legal justification, it's going to go to the Circuit Court Appeals and then to the Supreme Court. It's going to take months, they think, and they're deliberately using the law to subvert and delay him. He still complies. He doesn't say just ignore it. Even with the deportations, Obrego came back And then he went through the whole justice system. So why do they do it when they themselves know it's not true? Because they look at the issues, and I don't think they have confidence that they're going to win them. And they're in also, just to finish, they're in a doom loop, because they know that Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and nuts like Swalwell and Shrill Elizabeth, they control the party. And they know they can't win on the national level because they have something nobody wants. It's a 45% party, 47% nationwide with those issues. They will not win. And yet they know that to get nominated as a House member, as a senator, as a legislator, you have to embrace those issues. And so Bill Maher was asked the other day, James Carville, Bill Maher, why, and others, why did Harris lose? And, they all said the same thing, that it was very, I think George, what's his name, Clooney said that yesterday. Well, it's not her fault. She just had a record, and then she had to disown it in the general election, and that's hard to do. And that's true of all of them. To get nominated, they have to be so radical now. And then it reminds me when I was a little kid, Barry Goldwater took over the Republican Party in 1964. And in that space of 62 to 64, you had to be a Goldwaterite. And yet everybody knew that he was a very principled guy, but after the death of JFK and the Democratic Party, Great Society, that he wasn't going to win, but he took everybody down with him. McGovern did the same thing in 72. After the 68 election, he said, we're not going to run people like Hubert Humphrey anymore. We're going to take the U.S. military and cut aircraft carriers in half. We're just going to pull out of Vietnam and just leave it. And we're going to give a check to everybody, a guaranteed income. And that was one of the greatest landslides in history that Nixon won in 72. It took them, they had a little thing with Carter for 4 years, but it took the Democratic Party 20 years to go back to the center under Bill Clinton. And so that's where they are, and they don't know how to get out of it. They need somebody like Fetterman, about 10 of them, to say, well, you won't win elections here doing this. But we in Pennsylvania have a Democratic senator and Josh Shapiro, a Democratic governor, and we've got a lot of House members because we're not stupid. We promote fracking. We want, we're for renewable energy, but we want gas and oil as well. And we're not going to get into the gender stuff and the transgendered sports. But they can't do that in most states, or the people are afraid to.
Yeah. I saw that Clooney interview. You could tell he was very frustrated that he had to be the one to blow the whistle, that Joe Biden was not there. And then Kamala, not only would she have to run against her record and she wouldn't disavow it, she wouldn't even disavow or tell the truth about Biden. I think that would have really set her apart.
Yeah, that was, I think Sunny Hostin said, on The View, where do you disagree with him? And she said, I can't think of anything I disagree. And yet he was polling at that time 39%. So everybody in the country disagreed with him. But she couldn't.
Yeah. There was no distance between them, no sunlight between them. You've got a book out, The Land Was Everything. Tell me and my audience what that book's about.
Well, it's a new paperback version of something I'd written before. It was about farming, where I'm speaking from. I grew up on a farm. I lived there. And the transition in California, but elsewhere as well, from what we would call homestead, 40 to 200 acre farms, kind of diverse, and the agrarian communities that they spawned, and right on the edge of globalization. I could see that there was now a world market for food, both export and import, and people that were not vertically integrated. That meant they didn't control the packing, the preparation, handling, the trucking, the brokerage, and the delivery to supermarkets, for example, were not going to make it because the commodity prices were getting lower and lower that was the period when the EU was formed. It was bringing, in my case, raisins and dried fruit, and people were starting to plant vineyards with American capital in Mexico, in Chile, for year-round fruit. And in real dollars, in the 1990s, the price plunged by about 50%, and it just wiped out these small growers who did their own work. And there was a price to be paid. I kind of got in trouble, and the book tries to argue that I'm not making the argument that you're not going to have food, or you're going to starve, or food's going to be poisonous. But I was making the argument that you probably want to have fruit and vegetables at a farmer's market. It will be riper. It'll be less pesticides. There'll be varieties that are old varieties that are tastier, not the ones that have to be hard and to ship, for 3,000 miles or longer. But more importantly, these communities that had some percentage of farmer, there's something about family farming, the combination of physical and mental work, the idea of families staying in one place, kind of a shame cult that had been integral to the United States. And you didn't really want or need 50% of them, but you needed some vestigial presence of them to kind of be a voice, contrarian voice, and it's gone now. When I wrote that, from where I'm speaking now, I could look out, and there were maybe 10 different farms around ours. We were 120 acres there, and they were Armenian American, Japanese American, Indian American, Mexican American, Dutch American. It was a natural diversity. I knew all the kids. My kids grew up, my brothers, my cousins, I think there were 12 of them. They just, what we used to call free range. There was a house on every corner of the farm. They would just get up at 6 and 7 years old, and they would go to the packing house and work alongside their grandparents or their parents. It was a very 19th century existence, and I suggested that it was going to be gone, and now it's completely gone. When I look at the same circumference, there's not a single family farm. I rent. My brother sold out and left. I rent to a person who's a very nice guy, but he owns 10,000 acres. And my little 40 acres is just a little tessera in his mosaic. And there's no middle class. So all these homes that farmers used to live in, their families, the corporations have bought them up. In our case, usually one big one. But 3 miles away, it's a different corporation. And they rent the houses out to either foremen or families from Mexico, who then sublet it out to illegal aliens. So the house of the Wilsons or the Smiths, I used to know the kids, and there was, say, three or four kids and 2 parents. Well, now there is maybe 50 people living there. And they're in Winnebagos or trailers or shacks, and it's kind of like a third world existence. And the person who owns it doesn't even live anywhere near here. He lives 40 miles away, or in some cases they live in Los Angeles. And then, so it's a managerial class runs it, but there's nobody who's living on the land who actually gets a living from it. And that's happened nationwide with globalization. And so the last chapter we have a bi-coastal elite that had certain skills in law, brokerage, finance, tech, and they inherited an audience of 6 billion people. And I was lucky enough that I had a job in town as an academic, and I was writing, so I noticed myself that I was getting calls or letters from people in South Korea or Belgium about a column I wrote, because it's on the internet. So all of us that had those skills, but especially in business, that was the winners. And the guys in between, who were muscular labor or counted on like one commodity price, farming, mining, timber, manufacturing, assembly, their jobs were either offshored or outsourced. And then a vocabulary kind of grew up: irredeemable, deplorable, chumps, dregs, clingers. And it kind of, I didn't ever think there'd be somebody who would address that. But that was sort of what Trump was trying to do. He was trying to say, we're not dead yet. We don't have to outsource. We're not dependent on China. We have all this talent here. We can still grow our own food. We can still mine our own rare earth minerals. We can cut our own timber. So it was right at the crest of that, and it forecast what has happened now pretty accurately. But it was kind of tragic because I'm living in this house that, it's a big old Victorian house, and just 30 years ago when I was younger, there's kids here, and there was uncles and aunts and grandparents and Christmas, and now, it's my wife and I are alone. I don't think my children want to live here given the school district and the crime. And my other siblings said, you can't make it farming in California's done for, and they moved out of state. And it's kind of a shadow, and it's true of all these other people. So we really lost something, and our family did, but I also see that it was a larger trend. I think it's nationwide.
Yeah. Wow. Just in the last year, when we travel to places, I say to my wife, for example, we were in Newport Beach, and I thought, I wish I could have seen this place in its heyday, because now it's very run down and it's very expensive to live there.
Yes.
And the people aren't putting the money into keeping the buildings nice and the houses nice.
No, it's true. It's sad.
Like they should. But I think you're right. I think Trump tried to say, yeah, well, maybe you are deplorable, but you still got skills and value, and we'll use those to make America great again. We'll take the set to the side stones and make something really great. We'll make a temple out of this. So, well, I'm excited for people to get that. I'm going to put a direct link to that down below. I just want to say thank you for coming on. I watch you regularly, and you're making a difference. Your insight is incredibly helpful. If people want to, if people want to follow you online, Victor, where can I point them towards?
I have a website, Victor Hanson, HANSON.com, victorhanson.com, or Twitter at VD Hanson. And then we've just moved our podcast to the Daily Signal, and you can get those links at the podcast or at the website. And I do podcasts daily for the Daily Signal, and then 4 times a week longer one.
Okay, great. Well, I'll put those direct links as well as a link to the book. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Same here.